Hello, my name is Nathan Taylor, also known as Sockmatician on Ravelry, Instagram, Twitter and here on YouTube, and this is a tutorial on how to transition from double knitting into two-colour brioche made with the one-pass method and back into double knitting again. This swatch here is a little unusual because it has one colour on one side of the brioche and one colour on the other. That's not important for this demonstration, and this is how it goes. So I'm a two-handed double knitter, so I use one yarn in each hand, and normal double knitting would be both yarns at the back, knit with the knit colour, bring both yarns to the front, purl with the purl colour, and then take both yarns to the back between the needles. This is no different, this is standard double knitting, and I shall get to the place where I do the transition so I can show you how it all works. So purling with the purl yarn, yarns to the back, knit with the knit yarn, yarns to the front, purl with the purl yarn, yarns to the back. Got two more pairs to do. One and two. So this is where I'm going to make the transition. I complete the purl stitch of the pair and return the yarns to the back just as normal. All of that is standard double knitting, no special shenanigans going on there. But in order to get to the brioche section, and I do have a tutorial on the one-pass method of doing two-colour brioche, so you can check out exactly how that works from there, but this is just to show you the transitions. In order to do that, the first thing I need to do is leaving the knit yarn at the back and keeping the purl yarn here. It's important when you're doing this that the purl coloured yarn, so the colour of the yarn over shawls there, not the yellow knit, the blues. The pearl coloured yarn is in the left hand or to the left when if you're doing it with both yarns in the same hand. I'll demonstrate that a bit later on in the video. But so it's important you have the pearl to the left, and then in order to make that transition, you just bring the pearl coloured yarn over the top of the right needle here, and then you can carry on with the one-pass brioche method. So you go in as if to knit, which you're doing going under that back purl yarn, knit with the yellow, bring both yarns to the front, purl through the stitch and its yarn over with the blue, which is my pearl coloured yarn on this row, and then return the yarns to the back, not going through the needles as you would for double knitting, but by taking them over the top of the right hand needle. And I put my thumb there just to secure things. And then one more pair, so we go in through the stitch and its yarn over, going underneath that back yarn, not over the top of it, but underneath it. Knit there, bring the yarns to the front, purl with the pearl coloured yarn, and take the yarns to the back again, once more going over the top. There are two more pairs of stitches to do here, so I'll just whiz to that and then I'll show you how to transition back out of brioche and into double knitting. So the only thing that we did was we brought that pearl coloured yarn, which in this case is the blue one, it was at the back, we brought it around the top to start from the double knitting into the one-pass brioche. So here I am doing the last pair of brioche stitches. Here's the final purl of that section. And there we would normally take the yarns in brioche over to the back via going around the top of the right needle. In order to get back into double knitting, we leave that knit yarn where it is, making its yarn over for that last blue stitch there, and we just take the purl yarn to the back, and then we can start again. So it's only the purl yarn that has anything to do during the transitions. Going into the brioche, we brought the purl yarn over the top. Coming out of the brioche, we take the purl yarn back to the back, going through the needles, and then I can just start double knitting as normal, doing a knit one, bring the yarns to the front, purl one, yarns to the back, of course going between the needles because this is now double knitting again. So we have knit one and purl one and yarns to the back. I'm going to finish this row and then I can demonstrate how to do that same transition with both yarns in the same hand. I'll join you in a moment. I'm now back at the transition point between the double knitting section and the brioche section, and I am now working with both yarns in my left hand for continental knitting. Now this is not my preferred method of doing this kind of work, so it may get a little bit awkward and fiddly for me, but it'll at least be able to give you an idea of how to make this transition if this is your style of knitting. So I'm just going to work this last pair of double knitting stitches here. Of course, not only am I doing it the awkward way, I'm also doing it on camera, so bear with me. So that's the knit. I bring the yarns to the front. I effect the purl with the blue yarn, and then I return both yarns to the back. Now, just as before, it's the pearl coloured yarn, which again in this case is the blue yarn, which as you can see is to the left. That's very important. So that's the one that's going to be doing the shenanigans here, and all we need to do is just bring it over the top of the right needle. All I did was just basically I'd used the needle rather than the yarn and just tucked it under, and then I could hold it in place with my finger, ready to work the one-pass brioche with both yarns in the left hand, sorry. So you go into those two brioche stitches together, you go underneath the blue yarn and then pick up the yellow to work the brioche knit. Then bring both yarns to the front, go into both of those stitches there, and then I'm going to be purling with the blue. This really is awkward for me. Purling with the blue and taking that through there, then returning both yarns to the back, again going over the top of that needle, not going between the needles, but going over the top. That's what gives us the yarn overs which make the brioche texture. So to show you that again, the transition is done. We just take the pearl yarn to the front and that's it. But here we are with the brioche knitting into both of those yarns together, going under the pearl yarn and picking up the knit yarn there. Bringing both yarns to the front, going in, and purling, if I can pick it up there. Purling with the blue yarn, returning to the back, going over the top of the right needle. I've got two more pairs to do this way. Remember, always go under that pearl yarn before you pick up the knit yarn, and then I can show you once again how to get out of the brioche and back into the double knitting. This is really, really awkward for me, so I'm doing my absolute best. One more pair of stitches to go with this method. Let me just separate the two yarns there before I go back into the transition. So there's the knit, yarns coming forward, purl, and again, once again, we always complete the section, so we always take the yarns to the back by going over the top of the needle, but then all we need to do is take that pearl coloured yarn to the back. That's it. It was there, it's now there, and then I can continue double knitting as normal. There's the knit, bring the yarns to the front, purl with the yellow, exactly as you normally would, and this time of course the yarns go to the back between the needles because we're double knitting. Knit with the pearl, yarns to the front, purl with the yellow, yarns to the back. And that's the transition with both yarns in the left hand, and now I'll show you with both yarns in the right. Here I am once again at the transition point between the double knitted section and the brioche section, and this time you'll notice that I'm tensioning both of my yarns in my right hand for knitting English style. The mechanics are exactly the same, but it does look a little different, which is why I've decided to show you all three versions separately. So I'm just going to work this last pair of stitches, which are the last double knitting stitches before we go into the brioche section. Once again, this is not my preferred method, so forgive any awkward clumsiness with the knitting here. I shall do my very best. There we go, so that's the last purl stitch done, and I take my yarns to the back, as always at the end of a double knitted pair, ready to start the transition. And once again, the only thing that needs to happen is we bring that pearl coloured yarn to the front over the top of the needle. That is absolutely it. Then we carry on with the one-pass brioche, going into the brioche knit stitch there with its yarn over, going underneath, that's the most important part as always, the pearl yarn, and knitting with the yellow knit yarn there, bringing both yarns to the front, making the brioche pearl as normal, nothing going on there. And this time we don't need to take the yarns to the back, they're already in the right position, so we just put our thumb over it, or I do, not we, and then I go back into the brioche knit, going underneath that pearl yarn, knitting with the knit yarn, both yarns to the front, and purling with the pearl yarn, and the yarns are already in position over the needle, ready to go. Again, I've got 2 more of those pairs to do before the next transition. Underneath that pearl yarn, of course, knit with the knit yarn, yarns to the front, and then purl with the pearl yarn. All going well so far. Last pair coming up, underneath that pearl yarn, knit with the knit yarn, bring the yarns to the front, and purl with the pearl. Then to transition back to double knitting, once again, all that needs to happen is we take that pearl yarn to the back, leaving that knit yarn in front, which is going to create the yarn over for that last blue stitch just worked, and then you can continue double knitting in the normal way. So that's, oops, that's an awkward bit there, sorry about that. I'm going to try that one more time. That's more like it. And then yarns to the back through the needles this time as before, because we are now double knitting, not brioching. You can see on the needles we've got, in the double knit section, we've got the single stitches there, just knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. In the brioche section, every yellow stitch has a blue yarn over, and every hidden blue stitch there has a yellow yarn over all the way across, and that's how we make that lovely textured fabric there for the brioche section. And then back to the double knitting at the end. Again, we're back to the single stitches. That really is all there is to it. So you just need to remember to take the pearl yarn to the front as you go into brioche, and then out of it you take the pearl yarn to the back, transitioning from double knitting to brioche and back again using the one-pass method.